Hey everyone, welcome to The Explainer. I am so thrilled you're joining me today because we're taking a fascinating and honestly incredibly accessible look at the real-world costs of international trade. To do this, we are traveling right into the stick figure universe of Monkeyland and Bananaland. By looking at how these hypothetical primate nations trade their absolute favorite yellow fruit, we can actually unpack some of the most complex, headache-inducing economic policies happening right now in our own human world. So get ready because we're about to make global economics a whole lot easier to peel. Okay, let's dive right into this. Here is our agenda for today. 1. Monkey trade basics. 2. Calculating the banana tax. 3. The everyday shopper's burden. 4. The 1993 banana trade war. And 5. Future tariffs, green and digital. Starting right off with Section 1, Monkey Trade Basics. Let's start with the absolute simplest concept, okay? Monkeyland has a lot of monkeys, but unfortunately, their soil just doesn't grow very many bananas. Bananaland, on the other hand, is literally overflowing with bananas, but they don't have that many monkeys to actually eat them. And because Bananaland has such a huge abundance, they can sell them for really, really cheap. So Monkeyland buys bananas from Bananaland. Whenever a monkey country buys something from another monkey country, that's called an import. The monkeys are fed, and everyone is happy. On the flip side of that exact same transaction, we have the export. When a monkey country sells something to another monkey country, that is an export. For Bananaland, this is fantastic, They make their money by exporting their massive overflowing banana supply. So at this stage, what we're looking at is the absolute harmony of free trade. Everyone gets exactly what they need, resources are shared, and life is good. And this brilliantly illustrates our next concept, the trade deficit. Over time, Monkeyland realizes they are buying a ton of bananas, importing them, but they aren't really selling or exporting much back to Bananaland. When a monkey country imports more than it exports, it runs a trade deficit. In the real world, you'll often hear politicians use trade deficit like this scary buzzword, but fundamentally, it just means you're a really good customer buying more than you're selling. Conversely, Bananaland is sitting pretty with a trade surplus. They are exporting far more bananas than they are importing from the outside world. They're just raking in the cash. And while this looks great for Bananaland, this imbalance, the deficit in Monkeyland and the surplus in Bananaland, is exactly the kind of situation that sets the stage for governments to step in and start interfering. Moving right along to Section 2, calculating the banana tax. So what happens when the Monkeyland government decides to intervene and slap a tariff on all imported bananas? Well, a tariff is simply a tax. It's an extra charge just to bring a banana across the border. First, Bananaland sets their cheap base price. Then the Monkeyland government applies what economists call an ad valorem tariff. That's really just a fancy Latin phrase meaning the tax is a percentage of the item's cost. Finally, the everyday monkey goes to the store. They pay the base price, plus that percentage tax. It's literally exactly like ordering food on an app. You pay for the food, but you also get hit with a delivery service fee. The absolutely crucial takeaway here, Bananaland doesn't pay the tariff. The everyday monthly shopper in Monkeyland pays it. Now, you might be wondering, what's the psychology here? Why would the Monkeyland government intentionally make food more expensive for its own citizens? Well, sometimes it's to force citizens to buy local bananas, even if those local bananas are lower quality and way more expensive to grow. Sometimes it's straight-up jealousy, economic warfare aimed at hurting Bananaland's profits. Often, it's used as a giant bargaining chip for totally unrelated political negotiations. But at the end of the day, the biggest reason? The government simply wants to generate more money for itself. Which brings us to Section 3, the everyday shopper's burden. Let's see how this translates into real economic consequences for businesses, right? Because governments always promise that tariffs will protect local businesses. Massive, multinational, big banana corporations, sure, they might lose a little bit of their profit margin from tariffs, but they have the cash reserves to survive. However, the small, local monkey banana stands, they just get completely crushed. Why? Because small businesses often rely on importing cheap supplies just to keep their doors open. When the government slaps a tariff on those supplies, the local stand's overhead completely skyrockets, and they go out of business. The protection actually destroys them. And for the everyday shopper, the choices become pretty grim. Without the pressure of cheap, high-quality imports, local banana growers don't really have to compete. So, banana quality goes down, and local prices creep up to sit just beneath those new, tariff-inflated imported prices. The average monkey is left with a terrible dilemma. Option A, stretch their budget and pay higher prices for the good quality imported bananas, or option B, Save a few bucks, but eat worse, lower quality, local bananas. Either way, the consumer loses out. I absolutely love this quote because it perfectly captures the economic reality on the ground. Monkeys stressed, monkeys tired of this bullshit. It's funny because of the stick figure analogy, but it is deeply, deeply true. When governments play games with tariffs, the cost of living goes up, inflation hits the grocery aisles, and everyday citizens become exhausted trying to make ends meet. It's frustrating, and it places an immense burden on the people who can honestly least afford it. Okay, let's look at a real historical example in Section 4, the 1993 Banana Trade War. Back in 1993, European nations decided to give a special tariff discount on bananas imported from their friends in the Caribbean, basically trying to support the Caribbean economy. But the US, who also imported a massive amount of bananas from Latin America, felt this was totally unfair favoritism. So the US retaliated by slapping massive tariffs on European products, a total trade war, or actually, let's call it what it was. Guerrilla warfare. It got so completely out of hand that an international governing body, the WTO, which in our primate world is the World Trade Orangutan, had to step in to mediate the chaos. 20. Think about that. 20 years. That is how long this specific trade war dragged on. It wasn't fully resolved until 2012. For nearly 2 decades, everyday shoppers in Europe and America faced higher costs, retaliatory taxes, and market disruptions, all because governments were squabbling over the tax rate on a piece of fruit. Let's pivot to the future in Section 5, Future Tariffs, Green and Digital. So the crucial point we have to ask ourselves now is, how do you tariff something a monkey can't actually touch? Historically, tariffs were applied to physical goods crossing physical borders on boats or trucks. But as we all know, our economy doesn't just run on physical goods anymore. The next frontier of international trade disputes involves digital products. Governments are actively trying to figure out how to apply tariffs to things like ebooks, AI-generated artwork, and NFTs. Like, if you buy a piece of digital art generated by a server in another country, does your government get to tax that as an import? As these upcoming digital trade rules solidify, we could see a massive transformation in global tech markets, suddenly making digital media and software significantly more expensive for the everyday internet user. We're also seeing a massive shift in exactly why tariffs are applied. Standard tariffs focus purely on physical goods and money, which results in higher prices at checkout to protect local industries. But there's a new wave: environmental tariffs. Now, monkey countries are starting to tax imported products based on how much carbon emission it took to manufacture them. It's a way of linking trade policy directly to environmental health, effectively taxing countries that harm natural habitats. And while that's a noble goal, remember, the cost of that carbon tax will still eventually be passed down to the shopper. Apes together strong, for sure. Which leaves us with this final, really provocative thought. When governments engage in this guerrilla warfare, throwing tariffs back and forth, who really wins in a global trade war? It's rarely the small businesses, and it is almost never the everyday shopper who is left paying the ultimate banana tax. Next time you see a headline about a shiny new trade war meant to protect the economy, I want you to ask yourself, who is actually footing the bill? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer today, and as always, keep questioning the world around you.